It was a late October evening when three friends, Daniel, Sarah, and Michael, turned off the narrow road and onto a gravel track that wound through the Scottish Highlands. The sky was heavy with low clouds, and the landscape felt like a painting done in charcoal: black hills, grey heather, and a wind that carried the smell of rain. They had driven for hours, passing tiny villages where windows glowed like warm embers, and pubs where laughter spilled into the street. But their destination stood far from any laughter. Their destination was Blackwood Castle. Local legends called Blackwood a hungry place, a fortress that fed on grief. The villagers at the last inn had warned them. An old man, his hands trembling as he lifted a cup of tea, said, "The castle remembers the ones who trespass. Some it lets go, others it keeps." Daniel had smiled politely. He liked history and adventure. Ghost stories were just that, stories. Sarah was a photographer. Ruins meant good pictures, and good pictures meant a great portfolio. Michael, the quiet one, had simply shrugged. He came along to make sure they didn't do anything too stupid. The car rolled to a stop before the broken iron gates. The letters on the crest were almost gone, but you could still make out the name, Blackwood. Beyond the gates, the castle rose out of the earth like a cliff of stone, towers without roofs, walls torn open by centuries of wind and rain, a courtyard choked with weeds and the skeletons of old trees. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The world was strangely silent, as if the landscape were holding its breath. "Creepy," Sarah whispered, hugging her jacket closer. Daniel forced a grin. "Creepy is good. Creepy gets us views." Michael glanced back at the road, at the dark ribbon they had left behind. "Let's not stay too long." His voice sounded small in the open air. They stepped through the gates. Gravel shifted underfoot. Somewhere in the distance, a bird cried once and then fell silent. The air felt colder inside the boundary, as though the walls still trapped winter. Sarah lifted her camera and snapped a picture of the broken archway. The flash lit the stone for a heartbeat, revealing carvings, worn figures circling the arch, hands joined, heads bowed. "A ritual scene," she murmured. Daniel moved closer. The figures were faceless now, but their posture suggested worship or warning. They crossed the courtyard and reached the great door, which hung crooked on rusted hinges. Inside, the smell changed: wet stone, old wood, and something sour like extinguished candles. Their footsteps echoed, not quite right, as if the sound were turning corners before coming back to them. The entry hall stretched into darkness. A staircase to the left curved upward, the banister missing in sections. On the right, a corridor sloped slightly down, its walls lined with broken sconces. Daniel raised his flashlight. The beam wobbled and then steadied. "Left or right?" Sarah asked. "Up or down?" "Up," Daniel said. "We get a lay of the land. Roof lines, courtyards, safe routes." He liked to sound prepared, but his pulse had quickened. The castle felt like a person who had turned its face toward them. He couldn't explain that feeling, and he didn't want to. Michael ran his fingers over the stone. It was damp and very cold. They climbed slowly. The steps complained under their weight, groaning like an old ship. On the landing, a torn tapestry hung from a single iron hook. Most of the thread had faded to the color of smoke, but a few strands of red remained, the shape of a crown perhaps, or blood. Sarah took another photo. The flash jumped across the hall, and in that momentary burst of light, she thought she saw a figure at the far end, thin and tall, turned slightly away. She lowered the camera and stared into the dark. Nothing stood there now. "It's fine," she told herself. "Just pareidolia. Brains see people in shadows all the time." They reached a gallery where windows once looked over the hills. The glass was gone. Wind moved through the open arches with a hushed sound, like someone whispering through a door. On the walls, portrait frames remained without their paintings, squares of cleaner stone where faces had once watched. Daniel imagined the people who had walked here, lords and ladies, soldiers and servants, all reduced to this thin dust. He felt suddenly like an intruder in a house where the owners had only stepped out for a moment. A distant thud made them all jump. It came from below, from the right-hand corridor they had not taken. Michael glanced at the staircase. Animals, he suggested, though it didn't sound like a question. Daniel checked his watch, as if time mattered more than sound. We'll be quick. A lap of the upper floor and we're out. He said it to calm the others, and to calm himself they moved on, each of them listening now, each trying not to show it. The castle creaked. The wind sighed. From somewhere deep inside the walls came a slow, deliberate tapping, like fingernails on wood. Sarah swallowed and tightened her grip on the camera. She tried to focus on the textures, on the way light touched stone, on the work she knew how to do. But as they turned into the next corridor, all three stopped at once. On the floor ahead, in the film of fine dust, were footprints. Fresh ones. Not theirs. They led away into the dark, and each step was perfect, heel to toe, as though the person who made them had been careful not to make a sound. The three friends looked at one another. The wind fell quiet, and the castle seemed to lean closer, listening to their fear. Daniel forced a breath. "Okay," he said softly. "We stick together." They crouched to study the prints. The tread was smooth, not modern hiking boots, not heavy work shoes. If anything, they looked like the impression of a narrow leather sole. "Old-fashioned," Sarah murmured. "You can't tell age from a footprint," Daniel replied, too quickly. His flashlight skated along the floor. The prints kept a steady distance from the wall, as if the walker was familiar with the space and did not need to touch the stone for balance. "Someone could be squatting here," Michael said. "A caretaker, a drifter." He wanted a human explanation, something that would end with apologies and awkward laughter. A person you could talk to was always better than a sound you couldn't place. "We call out?" Sarah asked. "Hello?" Her voice went small in the corridor and came back to them with a faint delay. No answer. They followed, step by step, keeping their light close. The corridor opened into a long gallery where shattered beams cut the air at angles, and ivy reached in through the window arcs like green hands. Along one wall stood a sequence of stone niches. Some held broken urns. One held a tarnished candlestick that still smelled, impossibly, of smoke. Sarah raised the camera again. "Don't use the flash," Michael said. "Let's not announce ourselves." She lowered it, and the dark felt deeper for the choice. The footprints turned left into a small antechamber with a low ceiling. In the center, a square section of the floor had been replaced by newer wood. Daniel tapped it lightly with his boot. Hollow. Dust lay undisturbed on most of the boards, except for a faint crescent where something had been lifted recently and set back in place. He knelt and found a metal ring, cold, gritty with rust. He looked up at the others. "On three? We lift and peek." "1," Sarah whispered. "2." The third number died in her throat as the wind found a crack and sighed through the room like a warning. Daniel pulled. The hatch rose with a reluctant groan, and stale air breathed out from the opening, air that had slept a long time. A narrow ladder led down. The flashlight reached only so far before the dark swallowed it. The footprints ended at the hatch. If someone went down, Michael said, there should be prints on the rungs. Daniel tested a rung. It held. He swept the beam along the ladder. The wood was scarred, but clean of dust, as if it had been used. "We don't split up," Daniel said, the line of 1,000 horror movies, and for once it sounded like wisdom. "We go together." They descended into a space that felt different from the rest of the castle. The air was stiller, the cold more precise, like the temperature inside a church with deep foundations. The room at the bottom was small, square, and lined with alcoves. Each alcove held a stone tile carved with symbols, circles, lines, something like intertwined vines. In the center sat a table of black slate, and on it lay a map, the castle ground floor, inked in a hand both elegant and oddly impatient, lines confident but heavy, as if the writer pressed too hard. Sarah's light found a note in the corner of the map. A date, 1793. A name, H. Blackwood. "Henry," she breathed. "Lord Henry Blackwood," Daniel said, memory clicking from a plaque he had once read online. "Last of the Blackwoods. Reformer, collector, patron, recluse. Rumors about spiritualism, experiments, a scandal that was never fully written down." Michael frowned at the walls. "These marks. They aren't just decoration. He traced the outer ring of a symbol. The stone was worn smooth under his fingers, smoothed by touch, by repetition, by hands that had made the same motion again and again. A ritual, Sarah said, not as a question. Or practice, Daniel countered. Old families loved their secret societies. A sound interrupted them, gentle, almost kind, the soft turn of a page. They all turned at once. There was a book on a stand in the shadowed corner, a heavy thing bound in cracked leather. It had not been there a moment ago, or perhaps their eyes had not wanted to see it. The page had moved. No breeze touched this room, and yet the page had moved. Daniel approached, every step a compromise between curiosity and fear. The script inside was neat, the ink brown to the color of tea. Journal entries. Observations. Names. A phrase repeated across several pages in the margin, written smaller each time, tighter, as if the hand that wrote it were trying to cage the words. The veil is thinnest below. Below where? Michael asked, before he knew he had spoken. And as if the room had been waiting for the question, a tiny tremor ran through the stone under their feet, a sigh from the earth. The ladder behind them shifted against the wall with a single dry squeak. Sarah closed her eyes for one steadying breath. "We should go," she said. But when she opened them, her light caught something else, a set of newer footprints across the dusty floor of the chamber, fainter than those upstairs, but present, arriving from the far corner where the stone looked wrong, as though a doorway had been filled in with clumsy masonry. The footprints began at that sealed place. Not ended. Began. The journal consumed the beam of the flashlight like a patient animal takes food. Daniel read aloud, because reading aloud made the words feel less dangerous, as if shared sound could blunt their edges. October 12th. The voices are most clear by the old well. They do not speak in language, and yet I understand them. They are not one voice, they are a choir. He turned a page. November 3rd. The circle must be precise. Any flaw and they do not answer. With precision, they answer too well. The handwriting was steady at first. Later entries grew tight and small. December 21st. The solstice pulls the seam wide. I have seen my wife at the end of the corridor, hands open, as she stood before the fever took her. She does not look at me. She looks past me, as if I am the ghost. Sarah moved her light around the room. The carvings on the stone tiles formed a pattern if you stood in the center and turned slowly, circles nested in circles, lines like spokes from a hidden wheel, all converging on the black slate table. "This is not random," she said. "It's a layout. A plan." Michael had his hands on his knees, his breath controlled. He was shaking and did not want them to see. "People do strange things when they grieve," he said. "They hear voices. They imagine doors." Daniel read on. January 10th. I have built the lower chamber. The ground here is soft like clay. The masons were content to lay the outer walls but refused the center. I finished it myself. I have made the chair. I have placed the journal in its proper position. If someone comes after me, let them read. Let them understand why I did it. He turned the page, and the paper rasped like a dry leaf. February 2nd. The well is not water. The well is a throat. It drinks light. The candle goes down and does not return. Something settled in the corner. Not a sound of the pressure. As if a person had just sat down in a chair that wasn't there. Sarah's light swung and found nothing, only the momentary impression of a shape darker than dark. "Where's the well?" Michael asked, his voice thin. Daniel scanned the room. There was no obvious shaft, no ring of stones. Then he saw it, a circle drawn on the floor, a perfect ring of pale chalk, so fine it was almost invisible unless the light hit it directly. Inside the circle, the dust was smoother, as if buffed by something soft, the hem of a dress, perhaps, or the sweep of a hand. He stepped toward it without thinking. The pressure increased, a subtle push against his chest, an invisible palm. Sarah caught his sleeve. "Don't," she said, and the word seemed to make the room sigh again, a note of relief or disappointment. He couldn't tell. "Look," Michael said, pointing to the far wall. The wrong stone, where the footprints had begun, was not wrong at all. It was a door without a handle, a slab set on hinges so flush they had become part of the wall. In the mortared seam, someone had jammed a thin wedge of wood, the kind used to keep a door from closing entirely. The wedge looked new, not centuries old. New. A clear thought walked across Daniel's mind. You are not the first to come here. Someone comes often. He closed the journal gently, as one closes the hand of a sleeping person. We go back up. We mark the entrance. We call someone who enjoys this kind of nightmare. Michael nodded too quickly. Sarah stared at the seam in the stone. She did not move. That was when the hatch above them slammed shut. The dry squeak of the ladder was swallowed by the long, flat sound of wood striking wood. The sudden dark at the top of the shaft was complete and indifferent. They stood very still. The light in Daniel's hand made a small, bright island. Beyond it, everything waited. The wind, Michael said, but there had been no wind here. Not below. Daniel swallowed. It's fine. It's a door. He put his foot on the first rung of the ladder. He had climbed only 2 when he felt another pressure, a parallel pressure, as if something were climbing down toward him at the same pace from the dark above. Back, Sarah whispered, and he obeyed at once, not out of reason but out of the ancient obedience of prey. They withdrew to the center of the room, to the black table that reflected their faces in a faint blur. The journal on the stand opened itself with a sound like a breath drawn in. New words had been written on the page. Wet ink shone in the light. Do not leave, it said. We have so much to show you. They did not argue with the impossibility. The human mind is practical, even in horror. Handle the next second, and then the next. The writing glistened, drying before their eyes. Sarah raised her camera as if a photograph could make sense of it. She took the shot. The shutter clicked. For a moment, the flash revealed something standing between them and the door slab, tall, robed in the suggestion of fabric that never moved, a head held at the wrong angle. When the afterimage cleared, there was only stone again. Michael spoke first. If someone is here, we don't want trouble. We're leaving. He tried to sound firm and sounded instead like a child bargaining with the dark. The journal page turned by itself. New lines crawled across the parchment, as if an invisible quill drew them stroke by mechanical stroke. There is nowhere to go. But there is something to know. Knowledge for what price? Daniel asked, surprising himself. The question didn't feel like his. It felt older, as if someone had taught him these words in a dream. The room listened to the lights on their phones dimmed by a fraction, a slow drain. The cold settled into their hands and stayed. Sarah put the camera down. She reached for the map on the black table and found that she could not lift it. Not heavy. Refusing. Her fingertips tingled. It wants us to look, she said, and Daniel realized she was right. The map did not want to be taken. It wanted to be read. The inked corridors shifted. It was not the paper that moved, but the perception of it, halls straightening, a chamber unfurling, the sealed door marking itself in bright clarity like a fresh bruise. Beneath the drawing, a faint second layer appeared, the way a palimpsest shows its earlier text when light hits just so. Rooms beneath rooms. Circles beneath squares. At the lowest point, a symbol they had not seen before, a small open hand. Sarah's breath misted the air. The hand, she whispered. What does it mean? The journal answered in clean script, a bargain. Images came without warning, soft, viscous, like memories poured into the mind. The day of a funeral, a woman's hand slipping from Lord Henry's as the coffin lid closed. The taste of iron on the tongue. Candles burning down to small blue beads of fire. A whisper that was not in the ear but in the bone. We can return what is lost. Daniel staggered back. No, he said to nothing visible. No, you can't. Michael grabbed his shoulder. Hey, with me. His voice pulled Daniel up like a rope thrown to a drowning man. Sarah pressed her palms flat to the map as if calming an animal. The door slab released a sound like a sigh and swung inward a fraction, the wedge biting deeper but not breaking. From the gap, a darkness more complete than dark touched the room. Not absence of light, presence of something else. With it came a smell like rain on soil that has not known rain for 100 years. Michael took one step toward the door. It felt natural to do so, the way it feels natural to step forward when a friend you have not seen in years opens their arms. He stopped only because Sarah said his name very quietly in a voice that contained every summer they had ever shared. He turned his head. In that sliver of inattention, something brushed the sleeve of his jacket from the direction of the gap. Fingers, cool and careful, counting the fabric. He yanked his arm to his chest. "We're leaving." It was a statement now, wrapped in fear so tight it could not shake apart. Daniel nodded. He put his hand on the ladder again and felt nothing climbing down this time, only the wood, only the splinters. He climbed. 1 rung. 2. 3. No slam from above. At the top, his shoulder met the hatch, and the hatch rose. Air from the upper corridor met him with the ordinary smell of dust and old cold stone. He hesitated. The room below held his friends and something else that did not breathe. He reached down. Sarah, Michael. They joined him on the ladder, moving too slowly for panic and too quickly for sense. Feet found rungs. Hands found wood. The three of them rose into the corridor as carefully as if standing might wake a sleeping animal. Daniel closed the hatch. It felt wrong to slam it, and wrong not to. He settled for lowering it with an even pressure and setting the metal ring gently in place. The moment it met the floor, the slate table below them, unseen, ticked once like a clock. They walked. Not fast. Fast would have been unwise. The corridor lengthened like a trick of heat on a road, but their steps counted the distance back. At the turn, Sarah stopped. On the far wall, words bloomed one by one in a film of condensation, like breath writing on glass. "Do not part, copy that," Michael said, and for the first time laughed, a single astonished bark. No one joined. They kept to shoulder's reach, turning corners that had felt harmless not 20 minutes ago and now felt like decisions you could not undo. The gallery gave them the sky in grey slices. The land was a bruise of heather. Beyond the broken arches, rain had begun. At the stair, the castle exhaled again, a long pulse that made dust lift in the beam of the flashlight. Daniel put his foot down anyway. Each step creaked and held. The entrance hall received them like a mouth receiving breath. The door hung where it had been, and beyond it lay the courtyard and the broken gates and the car where they had left it, small and modern and wonderful in its ignorance. They did not run. Running invites pursuit. They walked, measured, eyes forward. The wind met them in the courtyard and, with it, a sound not made by wind, footsteps that kept pace behind them, not quite in time with theirs. When they stopped, the extra steps took one more beat and then stopped too, as if a fourth person misunderstood the rhythm. "Keep going," Daniel said, and they did. They did not argue with the impossibility. The human mind is practical, even in horror. Handle the next second, and then the next. The writing glistened, drying before their eyes. Sarah raised her camera as if a photograph could make sense of it. She took the shot. The shutter clicked. For a moment, the flash revealed something standing between them and the door slab, tall, robed in the suggestion of fabric that never moved, a head held at the wrong angle. When the afterimage cleared, there was only stone again. Michael spoke first. "If someone is here, we don't want trouble. We're leaving." He tried to sound firm and sounded instead like a child bargaining with the dark. The journal page turned by itself. New lines crawled across the parchment, as if an invisible quill drew them stroke by mechanical stroke. There is nowhere to go. But there is something to know. Knowledge for what price? Daniel asked, surprising himself. The question didn't feel like his. It felt older, as if someone had taught him these words in a dream. The room listened to the lights on their phones dimmed by a fraction, a slow drain. The cold settled into their hands and stayed. Sarah put the camera down. She reached for the map on the black table and found that she could not lift it. Not heavy. Refusing. Her fingertips tingled. "It wants us to look," she said, and Daniel realized she was right. The map did not want to be taken. It wanted to be read. The inked corridors shifted. It was not the paper that moved, but the perception of it, hall straightening, a chamber unfurling, the sealed door marking itself in bright clarity like a fresh bruise. Beneath the drawing, a faint second layer appeared, the way a palimpsest shows its earlier text when light hits just so. Rooms beneath rooms. Circles beneath squares. At the lowest point, a symbol they had not seen before, a small open hand. Sarah's breath misted the air. The hand, she whispered. What does it mean? The journal answered in clean script, a bargain. Images came without warning, soft, viscous, like memories poured into the mind. The day of a funeral, a woman's hand slipping from Lord Henry's as the coffin lid closed. The taste of iron on the tongue. Candles burning down to small blue beads of fire. A whisper that was not in the ear but in the bone. We can return what is lost. Daniel staggered back. No, he said to nothing visible. No, you can't. Michael grabbed his shoulder. Hey, with me. His voice pulled Daniel up like a rope thrown to a drowning man. Sarah pressed her palms flat to the map as if calming an animal. The door slab released a sound like a sigh and swung inward a fraction, the wedge biting deeper but not breaking. From the gap, a darkness more complete than dark touched the room. Not absence of light, presence of something else. With it came a smell like rain on soil that has not known rain for 100 years. Michael took one step toward the door. It felt natural to do so, the way it feels natural to step forward when a friend you have not seen in years opens their arms. He stopped only because Sarah said his name very quietly in a voice that contained every summer they had ever shared. He turned his head. In that sliver of inattention, something brushed the sleeve of his jacket from the direction of the gap, fingers, cool and careful, counting the fabric. He yanked his arm to his chest. We're leaving. It was a statement now, wrapped in fear so tight it could not shake apart. Daniel nodded. He put his hand on the ladder again and felt nothing climbing down this time, only the wood, only the splinters. He climbed. 1 rung. 2. 3. No slam from above. At the top, his shoulder met the hatch, and the hatch rose. Air from the upper corridor met him with the ordinary smell of dust and old cold stone. He hesitated. The room below held his friends and something else that did not breathe. He reached down. Sarah, Michael. They joined him on the ladder, moving too slowly for panic and too quickly for sense. Feet found rungs. Hands found wood. The three of them rose into the corridor as carefully as if standing might wake a sleeping animal. Daniel closed the hatch. It felt wrong to slam it, and wrong not to. He settled for lowering it with an even pressure and setting the metal ring gently in place. The moment it met the floor, the slate table below them, unseen, ticked once like a clock. They walked. Not fast. Fast would have been unwise. The corridor lengthened like a trick of heat on a road, but their steps counted the distance back. At the turn, Sarah stopped. On the far wall, words bloomed one by one in a film of condensation, like breath writing on glass. Do not part, copy that, Michael said, and for the first time laughed, a single astonished bark. No one joined. They kept to shoulder's reach, turning corners that had felt harmless not 20 minutes ago and now felt like decisions you could not undo. The gallery gave them the sky in grey slices. The land was a bruise of heather. Beyond the broken arches, rain had begun. The stair, the castle exhaled again, a long pulse that made dust lift in the beam of the flashlight. Daniel put his foot down anyway. Each step creaked and held. The entrance hall received them like a mouth receiving breath. The door hung where it had been, and beyond it lay the courtyard and the broken gates and the car where they had left it, small and modern and wonderful in its ignorance. They did not run. Running invites pursuit. They walked, measured, eyes forward. The wind met them in the courtyard and, with it, a sound not made by wind, footsteps that kept pace behind them, not quite in time with theirs. When they stopped, the extra steps took one more beat and then stopped too, as if a fourth person misunderstood the rhythm. Keep going, Daniel said, and they did.